Okay, um, I'll start again. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are doing well in this unprecedented. Okay, I hope you all are doing well in these unprecedented times. I welcome you all to today's webinar, which is Conundrum on Cognizability of the Offenses of Copyright. I am Ishita Borwa, currently working as a research intern under the guidance of Mr. Divyesh Srivastav sir. FICCI IPR Cell has been organizing webinars for the benefit of stakeholders. FICCI is the voice of India's business industry, and through its IPR Cell, it has been constantly endeavoring to raise awareness about IPR in India. Taking this very objective forward, the Cell for IPR and Management, Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, and along with FICCI, launched the 100 webinar series in March 2020. Since its launch, the webinar series has attained great success, for which we are extremely thankful to our participants and speakers for sharing their knowledge. On behalf of FICCI, I take this opportunity to welcome you all to this webinar on Conundrum on Cognizability of the Offense of Copyright. With this, I'd like to introduce you all to our eminent speaker of our today's session, Ms. Dishti Titus, who is a senior associate at ALG India Law Offices. Ms. Dishti is an alumnus of Symbiosis Law School, Noida, and an intellectual property attorney, and is a senior associate. Her area of practice focuses on trademark advisory and enforcement. She is responsible for managing trademark portfolios of some prominent companies. She specializes in drawing up comprehensive strategies for client, drafting legal notices, agreements, conducting investigations, handling negotiations, domain name dispute, and auditing portfolios. She is experienced in handling trademark matters such as oppositions and cancellations, and drafting supporting documentation for the same. She also has experience in appearing before various fora, such as the Trademark Office and the Intellectual Property Appellate Board. Her practice interest includes information technology laws and IP offenses. She has assisted and retained case law updates, court bulletins, and articles covering judicial decisions in the field of intellectual property for ALG's website. She has also contributed to the INTA Bulletin's Law and Practice section. It's indeed an honor to have you with us in today's session, and we welcome you. Before we begin, I'd like to I'd like the participants to adhere to some basic rules during the session. First, all the participants are requested to turn off their audio and video during the webinar for an uninterrupted session. Second, all the participants are requested to hold their queries, if any, which will be addressed at the end in the question and answer session. I now hand over this session to Ms. Dishti ma'am.
Uh, Thank you for the introduction, Ishita. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I am delighted that I have been given this opportunity to speak on this platform today, the 100 webinar series on intellectual property that is being done by FICCI and CPAM. It's a wonderful, I would say it's a wonderful initiative that's being taken up. So today I will be discussing the issue, the conundrum that surrounds the cognizability of the offense of copyright infringement in terms of the CRPC, right? So, as we start off, what is copyright? Copyright is a legal right that is provided to creators, which are the authors of literary, dramatic, musical, and artistic works, and producers of cinematographic films and sound recordings. It's basically a bundle of rights that includes inter alia rights of reproduction, communication to the public, adaptation, and translation of the work. So, authors invest time and money in creating these works, which they also exploit for gain. There also exist people who, without authorization, misappropriate these works for their own personal gain, which also causes substantial losses to authors who've already themselves invested so much in the work. So copyright protection ensures certain safeguards to the creators in respect of their works, which is not only the safeguard of their rights as against others, but also helps to foster creativity, which is beneficial for the economic and social development of the society. Without protection, incentive to create works is more or less lost. Such protection that penalizes also acts as a deterrent to unscrupulous activities. So when we look at copyright as an offense, it's important to state that in India, copyright, which is governed by the Copyrights Act 1957, one has recourse in terms of both civil remedies, which would include injunctions, damages, rendition of accounts, delivery, etc., as well as criminal remedies, which would be in terms of imprisonment, different grades of imprisonment, and or even fines, which would be the criminal aspect of copyright infringement. So to go into copyright, to go into copyright infringement as a criminal offense, one can always look at Section 63 of the Act, which states that any person who knowingly infringes or abets the infringement of either the copyright in a work or any other right conferred by this Act, except the right conferred by Section 53A, shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 6 months, but which may extend to 3 years, and with a fine which shall not be less than 50,000 rupees, but which may extend to 2 lakh rupees. Provided that where the infringement has not been made for gain in the course of trade or business, the court may, for adequate and special reasons to be mentioned in the judgment, impose a sentence of imprisonment for a term of less than 6 months or a fine of less than 50,000 rupees, which is below the base level that's already been provided for in this section. Right? So in a nutshell, the offense concerning infringement of copyright would be otherwise than the proviso would be anything not between 6 months to 3 years in terms of infringement, and a fine would be around 50,000 to 2 lakhs, right? So before we go further, before we dive into what the issue that surrounds the cognizability is, there are 2 other sections that will be relevant in our discussion going forward, which I would like to introduce at this point. One is Section 64, which is the power of police to seize infringing copies, and Section 70, cognizance of offences. As per Section 64, any police officer who is not below the rank of a sub-inspector may, if he is satisfied that an offence under Section 63 has taken place or is likely to take place, he is empowered to seize without a warrant all copies of work and all the plates used for the purposes of making infringing copies of the work wherever found, and all copies and plates so seized shall be as soon as possible produced before a magistrate. Right? Broadly, that's what Section 64 is. Section 67 is in a way a limiting provision, which in terms of cognizance of offences, for which no court that is inferior to that of a metropolitan magistrate or a judicial magistrate of the first class shall try any offence under this Act. So we go on to classification offences. So how are offences exactly classified? In this regard, the Indian Penal Code is the primary penal law which is applicable to all offences except as those provided for under other laws, and the Indian Penal Code defines an offence essentially as something that is punishable either under the code itself or under any other special law. The Code of Criminal Procedure is in fact the procedural law for criminal trials. So it lays down that the procedures that have to be followed by the police and the magistrates for collection of evidence, arrest and bail. It is the governing legislation essentially for procedure of the criminal trials. Now, this code, the Criminal Procedure Code, divides the spectrum of possible punishments and also categorizes these. So broadly, one can say is the categories are cognizable and non-cognizable offences and bailable and non-bailable offences. A cognizable offence is where a police officer has the power to make an arrest without a warrant, and he can also commence a preliminary investigation without the permission of the court. For a non-cognizable offence, a police officer may not make an arrest without a warrant, and the warrant is necessary. And again, the investigation cannot be commenced without the permission of the court. In terms of bailable and non-bailable offences, a bailable offence is simply one which is shown as bailable in the first schedule of the CRPC, or which is bailable by any other law in the time being force, and a non-bailable offence is simply any other offence. Now, the schedule that I refer to, the Criminal Procedure Code has basically, in the first schedule, it's divided into two tables. The first table lists out offences and their corresponding classification in terms of whether or not the offence is cognizable or non-cognizable, and whether it is bailable or non-bailable. So it basically identifies an offence and then the punishment, right? So, however, this table is not entirely exhaustive in terms of the possible offences, in so much as that it does not list each and every offence. So that's when the second table comes into play, right? So for offences that don't feature in this first table of Schedule 1, we must refer to the second table of Schedule 1, which divides the spectrum of possible punishments for offences against other laws into three categories, giving a general guideline for classification of the offence. Right? So this table essentially lays down a basic framework and a guideline, which is for offences that don't form part of Table 1. So in terms of IP offences, for classification of IP offences, which include the offence of infringement of copyright, the table that you can see, that is the table that is relevant to determine whether or not the offence is cognizable or non-cognizable, bailable or not bailable. So let's take a look at this table. There is basically there are three categories that have been broken down, that it has been broken down into. The first is where the punishment is either death, imprisonment for life, or imprisonment for more than 7 years. In that case, the offence is cognizable and non-bailable. The second category is if it's punishable with imprisonment for 3 years and upwards, but not more than 7 years. This is cognizable and non-bailable. The third category is if it's punishable with imprisonment for not more than 3 years. In this case, the offence is non-cognizable and bailable. So in order to understand how to classify, one must take into account this quantum of punishment and thereafter place it in one of the three categories of the Act. So for instance, the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act, a criminal action will entail punishment up to 2 years or a fine of up to 5 lakhs or with both. So in this case, given that the maximum possible sentencing is 2 years, this would be categorized in the third category, the last category, which is non-cognizable and bailable. The Copyright Act, however, unlike other IP statutes, unlike other IP statutes such as the Trademark Act, does not specify whether the offence is cognizable or non-cognizable, and thus this question is largely left to interpretation. The conundrum of whether the offence as provided by Section 63 is cognizable or not has been a long-standing one. The issue of classification has arisen owing to the lack of any provision and the fact that this punishment does not squarely fall in any of the three categories that has been laid down by the Criminal Procedure Code in the table, in the chart. So essentially the point of debate is between whether or not the offence is punishable under whether the offence falls in the second category or the third category, which is 3 years and upwards and not more than 7 years, or not more than 3 years. So factors that have been taken into consideration for categorization include the aspect of the prevalence of the term 3 years, which is the upper limit of punishment, which if on a plain broad reading you can see falls in either second or third category, and the fact that section 64 of the act empowers a police officer to make an arrest without a warrant, thus giving the impression that the intent of the legislation is to render the offence as cognizable. So to understand what the conundrum is and what various courts have held and the reasons for it, we go through a series of cases. So various courts have seem to have oscillating views, and they have time and again interpreted this table, the second table of Schedule 1 of the CRPC, in light of what is provided for in Section 63 of the Copyright Act. And some courts seem to have identified the offence as cognizable, whereas others have pegged it as non-cognizable. And most of these decisions you will see are by a single judge. So the first one is Jitendra Prasad Singh versus State of Assam. In this particular case, an application was made under Section 438 of the CRPC seeking pre-arrest bail by the petitioner. The court observed that as per Section 63 of the Copyright Act, the offence is punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend up to 3 years. The court discussed that the categorization of the spectrum of punishment, laid down in the CRPC, and the court's observations were that what is essential to note is that the expression punishable with imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years is distinctly different from the expression if punishable with imprisonment for less than 3 years. Inasmuch as the expression in the former, which may extend to 3 years, will mean that the imprisonment can be for a term as long as 3 years, whereas the latter, which is imprisonment for less than 3 years, will mean a period less than 3 years. On the basis of this observation, the court concluded that the phrase may extend up to 3 years would suffice to qualify that the offence fall under the second category, which is cognizable and non-bailable. So it is important to note here that this decision that we will be discussing after a few cases. We'll discuss a case, State of Government of NCT of Delhi versus Naresh Kumar Garg. In that case, it was held that the decision of the Supreme Court in Avinash Bhusale had impliedly overruled this judgment, the reasoning that was being given. We will be discussing this case in slides to come.
Sorry to comment. Can you try turning on the slideshow mode? We can't read the text.
Okay. Is it now better?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Right. So the second case that came about in terms of cognizability was Amarnath Vyas versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Right. So in this case, the single judge in its order placed reliance on a judgment of the Supreme Court for Rajiv Chaudhary versus State of NCT of Delhi. So before I go into what Amarnath held, I'll quickly tell you what the Supreme Court's judgment in Rajiv Chaudhary versus State of NCT of Delhi was. That case dealt with the offence of extortion punishable under Section 386 of the Indian Penal Code, where the punishment prescribed is imprisonment which may extend to 10 years. The question involved was with regard to interpretation and construction of the expression offense punishable with imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years in proviso A to section 167(2) of the CRPC. In context of the expression imprisonment which may extend to 10 years occurring in section 386 of the IPC. So basically the juxtaposition was between the imprisonment for a term not less than 10 years and imprisonment which may extend to 10 years. The court had observed that the expression not less than would mean imprisonment should be 10 years or more, and thus would only cover offences for which the punishment is imprisonment for a clear period of the 10 years inclusive or more than 10 years. The Supreme Court had held that the expression imprisonment for a term that may extend to 10 years could not be equated with for a term of not less than 10 years. In the former, 10 years could be the maximum punishment awarded to someone guilty. However, in the latter, 10 years is the minimum punishment that could be awarded. So in Amarnath Vyas versus State of Andhra Pradesh, the court placed reliance on the reasoning and this judgment and observed that there has been no provision in the act which makes the offence clearly a non-bailable one. The expression punishment for a term which may extend to 3 years is certainly not similar to punishment for 3 years and upward, and accordingly this offence was classified as bailable and non-cognizable, which is covered by the third category of offences. The next case, Abdul Sattar versus Nodal Officer Anti-Piracy Cell, Kerala Crime Branch Office and another, is a 2007 judgment. In this case, the court took a similar view that was taken in the first case that we discussed, Jitendra Prasad Singh. Although the court didn't rely on this, but the view that was taken was similar, and it was observed that the language of the provision of section 63 of the Copyright Act and the language of the categories in part 2 of the first schedule of the code clearly points to the conclusion that the offence under the said section, which are punishable with imprisonment for a period of 3 years and with a fine, the same would fall within the second category of offences, which is cognizable. The court in this case was the opinion that there can be 3 categories. The first deals with offences punishable with imprisonment for more than 7 years. And in this case, those offences for which punishment is 7 years cannot fall in that first category. The second category deals with imprisonment for 7 years and below up to 3 years. So here, imprisonment for both 7 and 3 years is inclusive. The third category is anything that goes below 3 years, and the punishment of 3 years would not be included. The next decision that came about on this aspect was that of the High Court of Kerala in Suresh Kumar versus the Sub-Inspector of Police, again another 2007 judgment. Here the court delved into the penal provisions of section 63 of the Copyright Act in light of the part 2 of schedule 1 of the CRPC listing out the spectrum of punishments. The court while discussing the 3 categories laid down in the CRPC stated that the 3 categories are basically dependent on the maximum sentence which can be imposed. So the first deals with offences for which punishment is more than 7 years, for which 7 years cannot fall in that category. The second is where it is 7 years and below up to 3 years. So the court notably observed that the Parliament, which used the expression for more than 7 years to identify the first category, has very cautiously used the word 3 years and upward, but not more than 3 years to identify the second category. The offences punishable with imprisonment for 3 years up to 7 years would both be inclusive and would thus fall in the second category. Right? So, in this case, it was again held that the offence would be cognizable. Here, the court did also state that the case of Rajiv Chaudhary was not useful, as the language in the proviso to section 167 clause 2, which was discussed in that case, is completely and entirely different from the language that has been employed in the schedule of the CRPC. The court had held that the language of section 63 of the Copyright Act, when read in accordance with the schedule, the position is very clear that the offence is clearly punishable with imprisonment for 3 years and therefore must be cognizable. The next decision was that of the High Court of Delhi, which came about in March 2013. State Government of NCT of Delhi versus Naresh Kumar Garg. This is the decision where the court had expressly stated that the decision in Jitendra Prasad Singh stands impliedly overruled. So again, a single judge in March 2013 in this case noted that in Avinash Basole versus Union of India, the Supreme Court had held that an offence punishable under section 135(1) clause subclause 2 of the Customs Act would be bailable. The interpretation of the Supreme Court of the term imprisonment, which may extend to 3 years or with fine or both, which is for an offence under 135(1) subsection 2 of the Customs Act, will fully apply in this case, right? The Delhi High Court also stated that it would be fruitful to refer to the provisions of section 64 of the Act. So section 64 of the Act empowers the police officer not below the rank of sub-inspector to seize the infringing copies of any work. So the court had stated that if the offence had been cognizable and non-bailable, there would be no necessity to specifically authorize the police officer with the power of seizure. The court in this case went on to emphasize on extent of punishment while concluding that the punishment need not be 3 years in all circumstances, and while keeping it up to 3 years, the legislature intended to classify this offence to be non-cognizable in nature. Applying the interpretation of the Supreme Court in Avinash Basole case and the relevance of section 64 that the court discussed, in as much as that it had been the intent of the legislature for the offence to be so, the offence was deemed as non-cognizable and bailable. The next case came about was Pinto Day versus State of Rajasthan and another, which was in the High Court of Rajasthan in April 2015. In this case, the court went on to, in this particular case, right, so this case, the court had a holding again similar to the first case that we discussed in Amarnath Vyas, where the court has observed here that there may be certain other classes of offences which may fall in between classification 2 and classification 3 of the second part, the second table of schedule 1 of the Criminal Procedure Code. But the court also said that merely because they are not falling squarely within the domain of classification 3, one cannot automatically treat it as included in classification 2. By default, they can't be considered as coming within the purview of classification 2. The court in this particular case held that it was in agreement with the proposition that was laid down in Amarnath Vyas, and accordingly the offence was held to be non-cognizable in nature. In the next case that we're discussing, Deshraj versus State of Rajasthan and others. This is fairly more recent compared to the previous cases that we have discussed. Here, the court recognized that there may be some offences which, again, here the court went on to a similar discussion. The court recognized that there may be some offences which may not completely fall either in the second category or the third category, but that doesn't imply that the offence would be taken under the second category by default merely because they do not squarely fall within the third category. So here again the court relied on the decisions that were pronounced in Amarnath Vyas and Naresh Kumar Garg. In those cases, if you recall, the courts followed the rationale of the Supreme Court in Rajiv Chaudhary and Avinash Bhosle. And in this instant case, in the case of Deshraj, the court held that since the phrases imprisonment may extend to 3 years and imprisonment of 3 years and upwards cannot be equated, they are not the same. In this case, the court held that the offence of the offence of infringement of copyright is non-cognizable. Again, this was also a single judge. I believe all the cases that we're going through are single judge decisions itself, right? Just a second. Okay, so the next case that we come to is that of the High Court of Gujarat. It's an August 2018 decision. Guru Krupa MedTech Private Limited versus the state of Gujarat and others. In this case, the court went into a discussion of the decision that was given in a case titled State of Andhra Pradesh versus Nagoti Venkataramana, which is relating to piracy. While discussing this, the court's observations were that the more important observations of the Supreme Court in the case of Andhra Pradesh versus Nagoti Venkataramana are that it is unnecessary for the prosecution to track on and trace out the owner of the copyright to come and adduce evidence of infringement of copyright. The absence thereof does not constitute lack of essential element of infringement of copyright. The observations of the court was of the opinion here that the observations of the Supreme Court gives a clear indication that the infringement of copyright is a cognizable offence and that the police must show a great deal of tolerance in the collection of the evidence. Coming to the next case, which is an even more recent case, is November 2019. Anurag Sanghi versus State and others, right? So this is a Delhi High Court case. The peculiarity of this case is that while the judge did form an opinion based on certain reasoning and things that the court stated, the court was bound. The court at the end of it held that because the court is bound by precedent, the decision that is given is contrary to what the judge actually opined in this matter, right? So let's first go on to what the judge's actual opinion was in this case. So the court relied upon this decision of Bhupinder Singh and others versus Jarnail Singh and another. So before I go on to what what the Delhi High Court has held, I'll give you a little background on what the Supreme Court's decision was in Bhupinder Singh. Right? So the decision for Bhupinder Singh and another versus Jarnail Singh was instructive in how an offence, the range of in how in an offence the range of punishment which does not fall squarely within any one category specified in the second table of Schedule 1 is to be classified. So basically that case was instructive and was instructive in nature in interpreting and deciding as conundrums that take place where an offence doesn't squarely fall in a category and there is any confusion in that regard, right? So the court examined the interpretation of the term punishable. So the court relied on various different authorities and cases and went on to see what exactly is the word punishable. And after its gamut of looking at a variety of literature, the court concluded that the word punishable is used in the Code of Criminal Procedure and various other enactments to mean the punishment that may be imposed for the said offence. The court further went on to state that it is not necessary that the maximum punishment as provided must be imposed. So while the section may provide punishment for, let's say, like taking the Copyright Act itself, not less than 6 months up to 3 years. So it's not necessary that it is 3 years must be imposed because that is the upper limit. A court may decide to impose a lesser punishment of, let's say, 7 months or maybe 10 months or maybe 1 year at that as well. So the court said it's not necessary that the maximum punishment as provided must be imposed, and thus if any punishment can actually be imposed for an offence, it would not be opposite to state that the said offence is punishable with that offence. So basically, it says that if 3 years can be imposed in a copyright offence, then it is not wrong to state that the offence is punishable with 3 years of imprisonment. So in this case, the court concluded by saying that it's clear that when it comes to classification of an offence on the basis of the punishment that can be imposed, it would have to be reckoned with the maximum punishment that is stipulated for that particular offence. I believe this particular decision of Bhupinder Singh has been overturned, but it has not been overturned in terms of this particular explanation, this instructive nature of the explanation that the Supreme Court had given. So circling back to the case that is specific to copyright and interpretation of whether it is cognizable or non-cognizable in Anurag Sanghi, the High Court or the single judge of the Delhi High Court relied upon this instructive nature, this instructive observation of the Supreme Court in Bhupinder Singh, and the single judge had gone on to observe that basically the single judge said that the Supreme Court's interpretation of the word punishable that is explained in Bhupinder Singh is instructive and there is no cavil with the said view. Right? So basically, yes, that while the case may have been overturned, there's no cavil with that view that has been given in the case. The specific facts, etc. aside. Thus, in cases where an offence is punishable by a term of imprisonment that may extend to a specified period, right? The maximum term of sentence that can be imposed must be considered for the purposes of classification of the offences for the purposes of part 2 of the first schedule of the CRPC, that chart, the spectrum of punishment. And in applying this rationale, the court had only merely observed that there can be no doubt that the offense under section 63 of the Copyright Act would be a cognizable offense, which would fall in the second categorization of part of the schedule, which is right. So which is not the least, the middle one, where it's cognizable and non-bailable. However, when rendering the judgment after this whole gamut of explanation and observations the court gave, the court did finally conclude that, however, given and in view of the decisions in the case of Avinash Bhosle and Naresh Kumar Garg, the previous decisions, the single judge was of the opinion that he had to allow the petition claiming the offense under section 63 to be non-cognizable, and in this regard his reasons for such a thing, for such a decision despite his contrary opinion, was that although he felt that the case of Avinash Bhosle, the Supreme Court has not indicated reasons for the conclusion or observation as to how the offense is classified as non-cognizable, its decision is binding on this court. So while this particular judge had a contrary view and was fairly confident in the fact that the offense of infringement of copyright should be termed as cognizable, merely because he was bound, because in his opinion he was bound by the precedent and the conclusions and observations in a Supreme Court judgment, he rendered his decision as the offense would be non-cognizable, thus allowing the petition that was filed. We come back down to the next case, which is the last case that we would be discussing, right? The last case that we will be discussing, which is again of the High Court of Rajasthan. Again, a single bench, a single judge decision, the Jodhpur bench. And this decision was of April 2020. This is Nathuram versus State of Rajasthan. So, in this particular case, the court opined that its previous decision in Pinto Day versus State of Rajasthan, we've discussed this case previously, just to get you guys on the page. Pinto Day versus State of Rajasthan was a 2015 judgment of the Rajasthan High Court itself. And in that particular case, the judge had held that the offense would be deemed as non-cognizable while upholding the view of Amarnath Vyas, right? So in this particular case, the court went on to say that the court opined and recognized that its previous decision in Pinto Day appears to not be laying down the correct proposition of law. And on this basis, the court held that the question framed, basically the court framed a question of law and referred it for resolution and placed it before the Chief Justice for resolution by a larger bench. So the exact question that the court has framed in this particular matter is, what would be the nature of an offense, whether cognizable or non-cognizable, for which imprisonment may extend to 3 years is provided and no stipulation is made in the statute regarding it being cognizable or non-cognizable. So basically, in a nutshell, the question that is framed is pretty much the question at hand, that we are determining that when a statute is silent on whether or not an offense is cognizable or non-cognizable, and the imprisonment, the spectrum of punishment is such 3 years, which one can state it can go either ways. It can be classified in one of the two categories and there is no clear demarcation. So what is the nature of such an offense, right? So although the court has gone on to state that it believes that its prior decision does not appear to lay down the correct proposition of law, it it's been silent on the reasons. It's not delved into any clear reason for why it is seeking redetermination of the classification. It doesn't. The court has not gone on to discuss or point out why the court believes or feels that the proposition of law that was laid down is seemingly incorrect, right? So far, there seem to be many decisions by single judges, and this particular decision from the larger bench of the Rajasthan High Court is much awaited. So for since we've discussed each case, and I mean, I believe it's a little difficult to keep track on what happens in what case, and which case is cited by, or which court is cited by, which position, which stance has each court taken. I have tabularized for you basically the crux of it, the main bit of which decisions favor cognizability as the offense as cognizable, and which decisions favor the offense as a non-cognizable one, right? So, sorry, just a second. So from the way I look at it and the cases that I have read up on, or the legal precedents or the legal propositions that I've seen so far in terms of this conundrum, there doesn't appear to be a clear winner in my opinion, right? So I mean, there are some courts that are supporting the fact that it's cognizable, and there are some courts that are supporting the fact that it's non-cognizable in nature. There is not a major lean, as I would say. I mean, I mean, the various courts, even with the decisions of various courts, it doesn't seem that any one side is being favored more by courts or favored less by courts. That broadly appears to be, like, it seems to be, it's almost more or less equal. Like, I mean, there is no way to say that yes, cognizable, the fact that the offense is cognizable is an opinion that more courts have leaned towards, or the converse, that non-cognizable is the opinion that more courts have leaned towards. There seems to be great lack of clarity in this regard. And that lack of clarity is something one needs to overturn. Given that in today's day and age, copyright infringement is rampant with the advancements in technology and the usage of the internet, or even otherwise, the ease with which people are able to do things compared to previously, it's imperative that this catch-22 nature of classification of copyright, this catch-22 nature of classification of the offense of copyright as either cognizable or non-cognizable be brought to finality. Basically, until this debate is settled, there will continue to be ambiguity over even the procedure of investigation, the rights of either party, including that of the accused. So this ambiguity doesn't help. It's not just the cognizable or non-cognizable nature. The ambiguity leads to other issues, which, like I said, is with the procedure of how the investigation should take place. What are the rights of the parties? What are the rights of the accused, right? So if we look at in terms of what are the pros and cons of either the offense being either cognizable or non-cognizable, you can say on one hand, if the offense is determined as cognizable and non-bailable, this may cause panic and fear and consequently stifle creativity and expression owing to the harsher procedures as opposed to non-cognizable offenses. So as an author or as a creator of a work, one would constantly be under this fear that the work may be rendered as infringing. One may not have the intent to actually infringe on a work, but given the nature of how copyright work works, one may think that the one is going towards a fair use or fair dealing, and is not hit by copyright infringement, which may not be the case. So it may act as a deterrent altogether for me to actually create that work. Further, if the offence is deemed cognizable, parties may misuse this for causing obstruction and hindrance in another's business activities and also give unrestrained power to police officials. So tomorrow if company A wants to hinder the business activities of company B, the police officials have no restriction on going to conduct for seizure and all of that. So it's a hindrance. And bigger companies may also use this to dominate and remove smaller players from the market. On the other hand, classification as cognizable may also be the needed harshness that one needs. The needed harshness required to act as a deterrent and dissuade unscrupulous activities by infringing parties and reduce the current alarming rate at which copyright infringement activities are actually taking place. Right? So to conclude, broadly the factors that are relevant in determining or assessing how to classify the offence of copyright infringement under section 63 would be: one is the quantum of punishment, as we've discussed, the second table of schedule 1 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, whether or not this 3 years would fall within the second category or the third category. The interpretation of the intent of the legislature basically towards the terms. Section 64 of the power of police to seize infringing copies. One has to question, does this provision render the intent of the legislature that the offence be cognizable itself? Or was this specifically included in the act so as to give additional power to the police that was otherwise absent in terms of a non-cognizable offence? Another thing one must look at is section 70 of the Copyright Act, which is cognizance of an offence, cognizance of offences. This limits the jurisdiction. Basically, an offence is not to be tried by a court inferior to the metropolitan magistrate or the judicial magistrate of first class. So in an ordinary circumstance, a non-cognizable offence can be tried by any magistrate as per the Code of Criminal Procedure, right? However, given the limiting nature of this particular section in the Copyright Act, one could well argue that the offence of copyright infringement is to be construed as cognizable. Because if it were non-cognizable, then in light of the Code of Criminal Procedure, it could have been tried by any magistrate and the need for this particular section 70 would not be there. One other important aspect to look at is the Copyright Amendment Act of 1984. The objective of this act was amendment was linked to piracy becoming a global issue, and it sought to essentially remedy the mischief of copyright piracy. Notably, this particular amendment substantially enhanced the punishment that we now see in section 63 of the Copyright Act. So initially and earlier, prior to this amendment, the punishment was the punishment for imprisonment extended to only 1 year. Post the amendment, it is now up to a term of 3 years. So if one is to harmonize all these four broad aspects, if one is to harmonize all of them, in my opinion, the logical conclusion that flows or follows in terms of the intent of the legislature would be that the legislature intended to render the offence as one that is more serious in nature and thus not make it bailable or non-cognizable. Not bailable because bail can be thought as a matter of right. But instead, the gamut of things, the reasoning for inclusion of these particular provisions and the Copyright Amendment Act 1984, which greatly enhanced 3 times the maximum possible sentencing. I would say the intent of the legislature was to render the offense more serious, to curb the increasing mischief in terms of copyright piracy, and therefore the offense would likely fall as cognizable and non-bailable. In this regard, there is, if one was to look at, if you search for study on copyright piracy, you'll see that the copyright website, the government's website for copyrights, there's a study that was conducted and on copyright piracy. So the study delves into piracy and statistics and all. So in that study, it's one place one has concluded that the 1984 amendment made copyright infringement cognizable and non-bailable. So my assumption is that, again, this was said on the same premise that the reason for the whole objective of what the amendment was and the actual enhancement of punishment 3 times from 1 year to 3 years would notably render, one would say, yes, the offense is cognizable in nature. Thank you. If anybody has questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am. This is Siddharth Pandey. I have a question.
Yes, Siddharth.
Ma'am, just to ask that in general, the online piracy offenses are mainly cognizable only, or sometimes they might be non-bailable as well?
So, Siddharth, that really to answer your question, that would online piracy offenses in terms of, so see, like I said, so bailability and non-bailability and cognizability is essentially to be looked at from the schedules that are given, from the schedule and the tables that are given in the Code of Criminal Procedure. So for a plethora of offences, there's a table which very clearly provides. So it'll list out the offence. So like it'll say bribery, and bribery, then they'll term it as bailable or non-bailable and cognizable or non-cognizable. So there's like a proper chart in this regard. And in other cases where the law is silent on this, one follows this spectrum, right? So for instance, the Trademarks Act also, so the offense of criminal offense in terms of trademark, if you look at the punishment laid down in section, I think it's 102, it's a 100.
103, 104, these falsification and all. Yes, ma'am.
Right, falsification. So if you look at the punishment is the same as it's in copyright. So it's not less than 6 months and up to 3 years, right? So I would say for in that, so why the issue doesn't arise there is because the Trademarks Act itself lists the offence as cognizable on the basis of this particular schedule in the table. So if it's cognizable, it's non-bailable. If copyright is missing that particular aspect on whether or not the offense is cognizable or non-cognizable, and which is why in terms of online piracy, one would again, in terms of piracy in respect of copyright, one would have to then lay back onto currently it is your own interpretation of the particular terms up to 3 years, etc. In terms of the cases, and as well as if there's precedent. Otherwise, we actually do require this conundrum to come to an end, and for like a more concrete decision of probably a higher court that is binding to be taken. So to answer your question very simply, it would really depend on what the spectrum of punishment that is provided in the particular law is and how we can interpret it. So in terms of copyright, I can tell you that in the conundrum, like I said, in my opinion, it should be cognizable and non-bailable.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this fruitful information. It was indeed very informative. Now, we would like to turn over to question and answer round, and I would like to hand over to Shreya to help assess the session with Dishti ma'am. Thank you.
Uh, Good evening, everyone. I am Shreya Singh, presently interning in Tiki IP Cell as a research intern, and I'll be handling the question and answer round for this particular webinar. Thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful session. We have received some questions from the participants while they were registering for this particular webinar. Also, participants can unmute themselves and ask any question if they have any, like Siddharth already did. The first question is, what are your views on the recent decriminalization of certain copyright offenses which have been proposed by Government of India? Should these acts be decriminalized? And wouldn't it encourage habitual offenders if they are?
So, in terms of decriminalization of certain copyright provisions, I would say that yes, while decriminalization does, if you look at it in one particular manner, yes, it would essentially probably embolden habitual infringers, etc., to probably go one step ahead. It kind of creates a little market for infringement, saying, okay, so this has been decriminalized, the punishment is lesser, so let's go ahead with it. Having said that, I would say that one can't always have a very aggressive approach, because as I said, that it's not only one side that we can look at this from. So, one can't only look at the aspect of whether or not is there any criminal remedy, right? Because when you criminalize, look at it the other way. The minute you criminalize an offense, it also stifles people from creating further. It creates that inherent fear. So I think in balance is, yes, important, and while an offense is decriminalized, one still has, it doesn't take away from one's legal basis. So one still has legal remedies, maybe not in terms of criminality, but in terms of civil in nature. So one still has certain resolutions and certain modes available to enforce their copyrights. So with that in mind, I would say that yes, the balance needs to be drawn, and looking at decriminalization of offense, it's not fair to just simply look at it from the perspective that it makes it easier for people, or infringers are emboldened to probably carry on the infringing activities.
Right. The second question is, what are the challenges faced by the film industry relating to the copyrights?
So, right, so that's a good question. So some common copyright related issues in the film industry would be, so one is, so to begin with, is establishing rights over plots, right? So in several instances, courts have dealt with the issue where copyright infringement is claimed on the grounds of identical or similar plots for movies. And one key reason for this kind of issue is revelation of scripts by the originator without signing NDAs. So a lot of times people don't sign NDAs. A lot of times the similarities as to the challenges are, how do you show those similarities to be such that they are not under fair use and they actually traverse into copyright infringement, right? So unauthorized copying of a script or a plot, one would say, is it just merely in the idea, or is there substantial copying? So to be able to show that, that's one challenge. Then other challenges are that a lot of times there are remakes and adaptations from movies or books, or even remakes of songs which have been done without acquiring rights for adaptations or making those remakes, right? So that's also there in the film industry. Then, of course, one very rampant thing that is probably increased at this point of time, with people being, limited to home, and everything, you're watching everything on your own laptop and screen, would be dissemination of pirated copies of film. I would say that this is one major challenge that the film industry has in general faced. The piracy of movies, etc., and dissemination and illegal downloading of songs or videos, movie clips, etc. but I would say that is also steadily increased in the last in this time because more people are reliant on watching things on their systems. And so yeah, so I mean things like these. I mean there are a plethora of other issues that come up. There are not, like, so again, like I said, unauthorized use of sound recordings, and so yeah, things like that. I mean, you look at people were using this platform called TikTok, and all sorts of songs were being used from movies, etc. Or so things like that. So those are the kind of challenges that film industry generally face on a daily or on a more regular basis. I would say I would say for me the most prominent one would be the plots, like rights over plots, and how do you dissuade and how do you prevent other people from using plots. A lot of times you see in cases court companies are going to the court at the last possible second to stop a movie from being released and stuff. So getting the legal system and getting through the entire process well in time so as to preserve your rights.
Right, ma'am. There's a follow-up question on the first question that you took. Now, taking the decriminalization question forward, shouldn't habitual offenders be penalized as they would indulge in the infringement knowingly, and shouldn't the act contain a distinction between punishments granted to habitual and non-habitual offenders?
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Yeah, sure. Taking the decriminalization question forward, shouldn't habitual offenders be penalized as they would indulge in the infringement knowingly, and shouldn't the act contain a distinction between punishments granted to habitual and non-habitual offenders?
Right. So, so I haven't actually looked at what exactly. I don't know offhand what exactly which decriminalization is. But currently, as things stand, there is something in the act in respect of habitual infringers. So when you talk about Section 63, it talks about the offence, and I believe it is 63A, which talks about a subsequent and second offence. Right. So if I can just open out that particular provision, I'll be right. So Section 63A talks about enhanced penalty on second and subsequent convictions. So I would say yes. There is provisions. One does look at, and one does go into habitual offenders, and there is a distinction. So when there is a second and subsequent, so when there are for the same offences are happening again by the infringer, there is provisions to provide recourse in that regard. So a distinction, I would say, does exist in that case. And in this case, so the enhanced penalty actually in the section, what happens is, as I discussed earlier, Section 63, it talks about minimum sentencing 6 months and maximum 3 years, going up to 3 years. So in case of the subsequent and second and subsequent convictions, the minimum penalty, the minimum imprisonment goes from 6 months, it's bumped up to 1 year. So it's 1 year to 3 years. So yes, there is something in that regard.
How is YouTube enforcing the issue of copyright on its platform?
So there's something, so there's one thing is the DMCA notices, that there's something called the DMCA notices, and apart from that, YouTube itself, if you were to look at the YouTube's infringement policies, YouTube does not typically itself adjudicate as such, but YouTube does have a form on its in its FAQs or some, I'm not sure where exactly, what the exact places, but YouTube does have a form for right holders to file for complaints with regard to copyright infringement. Typically, YouTube will not take infringement notices from any third party, and it would essentially have to be from the right holder itself. It does accept notices from or requests from agents like counsel for right holders, but in that case, I believe YouTube asks you to show your relation to the authorization itself. So basically you file a notice. This notice can be done through the online available form, but YouTube also accepts free-form notices in the form of email. So you can send it separately. And you need to list out your who you are, what your rights are, the exact links or what videos or where you believe the copyright infringement is prevalent, and how you think it's infringing your copyright. And on the basis of that, YouTube takes it further. So the infringer is notified for a response, and the entire proceeding takes place like that if it is deemed that yes, there is substance for a copyright claim, infringement claim.
The next question is, how far can intermediary platforms be held liable in case of copyright infringement taking place on their platform? Is there any judgment throwing light on this currently?
So there are judgments which talk about liability of intermediaries, right, in general, in terms of trademarks and copyrights. How far? I mean, I don't remember it. I mean, I don't remember the facts right and the case names right off the top of my head. But I would say how far intermediaries can be held liable is, as the cases have discussed, is very relevant and related to how or what role an intermediary exactly, what role that intermediary plays. Is the intermediary simply providing a platform? Is the intermediary actively involved in dissemination of that content, or is the intermediary a silent party? So those kind of factors would be relevant, and there are a couple of cases in this in this regard. There was one to do with, I believe there was a Disney case, but I don't remember the facts very clearly off the top of my head. But yes, essentially one would have to look at the role of the intermediary that it plays to determine whether or not the intermediary would be in fact liable for the copyright infringement itself. In my opinion, if you ask my opinion, I would say that one needs to, while an intermediary needs to be vigilant, one needs to also not place too much liability on an intermediary that is dormant, that is not actively participating in there's no active participation from the intermediary in advertisement, etc., of the particular mark in question.
Is there any change that has come in the copyright arena because of the COVID pandemic?
Are you talking about change in terms of the statute, or change in just in reality, in practicality?
Practicality.
So yes, I would say the pandemic and and COVID has had an impact, on a lot of things, including copyright in itself. I would say that it's gone ahead. I mean, piracy has always been a rampant issue, and with any kind of advancement and as we have progressed as a society, unfortunately, so has piracy. I mean, with our progressing, piracy also tends to go right ahead and progress. I would say that yes, the issue has worsened for the simple reason that you will see that suddenly you log onto your system and you search for anything, and you will see a plethora of businesses that have come up. Like a very simple example is face masks. There were a couple of cases also in this regard. So the newer, I mean, when there's demand, there is supply, right? So there's been a demand for face masks and sanitizers and all. And with that demand, there have been businesses that have come up to fill in that demand. And you'll see that there are face masks, and at one point there were face masks that were being sold for a brand, whereas the brand is commented and saying, we don't even do this as a business. So using the logos and the designs of brands, so that again, copyright infringement. So I would say COVID, yes, not only in terms of face masks and sanitizers, but in terms of businesses and I mean, yes, because the demand for products has increased so much in terms of even food items, and also you will notice, like, there'll be a certain X brand of cheese that you wanted, and there's this high demand, and probably the manufacturer hasn't gotten to meeting that demand, and you will see so many variations, like, there's just the similar packaging. Like, I mean, one example I would say I have witnessed is there was this particular this green packaged cheese that I used to order, and suddenly I see there's a variant that's Chaudhary cheese, and I actually didn't notice the difference because it was the packaging and the design and the elements were identical. So I would say yes, the pandemic has paved some way for infringers and copyright infringement and piracy to increase.
Now, if the participants have any question, they can unmute themselves and go ahead. I don't see any question. So thank you so much for clarifying the doubts and resolving our queries so patiently, ma'am. Thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. Also, you will find a feedback form in the chat box, and we request you to fill the form as it will help in increasing the quality of our upcoming session. With this, I would like to conclude this webinar for today. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for taking out time from your busy schedule, and the participant for making this webinar a huge success. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you.